So you remember yeah. Wait 2 more minutes. I'm gonna go to the bathroom. Okay. Then they'll just do that. There you go. Oh, and then I have to. Sure. Okay, so do you want me to log in?
I think I can use my computer. And then, do we have someone,
There's somebody, there's a. Yeah.
is there anyone who will be, are we gonna suggest people email us?
Yeah, and so, and I was gonna say, it, I know that our. On.
And
Send
who's
them the link. It's gonna. Yes, yes. The first one has been practice coming in. Yes. It's true.
You don't know how to act in social situations anymore.
So I don't need to, just
No. It's part of public meeting. It's not an open meeting. We don't have. No. That- I know. Well, then okay. Right. Just for the. Like. Yeah.
I think it's too late to do that easily at this point. Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah. Put real pants on. Where's Matt?
Oh, Karen Shaw
Yeah.
is here.
Yeah. 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 Johanna.
So you're gonna start?
No.
Yeah. Oh, good.
No.
I know you.
I am only here to speak when spoken to.
When we're ready.
No, Elaine. The chair first. Okay, so.
If you don't speak in the microphone. If it doesn't come through the speakers, they won't hear.
All right. Ready?
How's it going? Getting your MOU to sign.
So. Your instruction that. You have.
Oh, yeah, yeah. We tell people, get them in early.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here's our.
Great, fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
22 people online.
So. Even though.
Jim. The Jim.
Jim was the Jim who was.
Oh, okay.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You know, you can make it like this with it on the side. You like it like that?
It's.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, there's my Linda. She's my friend.
When you say friend, I always wonder if it's a library friend or your.
No, so it was. So.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. Okay.
And then, Jill. I want to. I'll go get it.
40 people.
Hi, Becky. How are you? Good, thank you. So far, so good?
Oh, yeah. And did you know how much money they raised?
Hello?
this week?
I think it was north of 50. I didn't. get the
Hello?
Final number.
Hello?
That's great.
Hello. It's 7:05-ish, so we're gonna get started.
No. Not yet.
Wheezy says she can't hear, so we're going to raise the volume. Is there a way to raise the volume on these?
The best way is to be quiet.
Okay, everybody be quiet except for me right now. I'm Elaine Palaio. I am the chair of the Library Building Committee, and I just want to welcome everybody here, both the folks who are here in person and the folks who are here on the webinar. We do have this going as a live stream webinar. We are going to have a period of time at the end of the presentation where we will be taking questions from the audience. If you are on the webinar, and the reason I'm talking into this microphone is because that's how you're hearing me on the webinar. If you are on that and you want to ask a question, the only way that you can ask a question is by going to the Library Building Committee's email, livebuild@shutesbury.org, and send us your question. I will be sitting here with my computer and I will read those questions out when we get to that point. So otherwise, if you're in the room, you can ask your questions in person. I want to start by introducing our building committee. For those of you who haven't met all of us or seen us in action, we've had a great time. First of all, of course, Marian Antonellis is on our committee. And for the rest of the committee, if you just stand up and show your faces, Stephen Dalmas, Jeff Quackenbush, Penny Jakes, Dale Houle, Molly Moss, and myself. Oh, I'm sorry, Brad, you're over here, Brad Foster. I knew there was one more. And we have with us tonight in person, this is very fun to have her with us here. This is Lauren Storr, who is the library building specialist with the Mass Library Council. And we have our owner's project manager, Neil Joyce from CMS, and Roger Hoyt, who is also from CMS. And of course, we have our architects. We have Odenzello is our architectural firm, and we have Matt Odens here. And he's going to, I'm sure, take a few minutes and introduce his crew and the folks who he's working with. Matt is going to be giving the presentation. I want to remind people that tonight we are really looking at the buildings and the choices of building design. And that's what we are going to be specifically going into for tonight's meeting. And so try to keep your questions, if you have questions at the end, try to keep them to that. I would like to find, where did Matt France go? There he is. Matt has an announcement to make. Would you come on up and use the microphone? Here, you want to use this one?
That's all right, I can bend down. It's all good. Excellent. Good evening and welcome. I'm Matt Franz, president of the Friends of the Spear Memorial Library. And I'm as excited as you are to see the schematic design options for our new library, which is being presented here tonight. Many years of work and many innovations have brought us to this moment. We are all thankful to all of you who contributed to that work with your labor and your cash. Last week, 181 donors raised an amazing $53,510 on Library Giving Day. Fabulous. Amazing. That money will go straight into building our new library, and it will leverage 3 times the amount in state funds. Words cannot express our gratitude for community support of this magnitude. Our work isn't finished. We'll keep fundraising for the new library until the doors open in the spring of 2025. And then finally, I just wanted to say a quick thanks to all the volunteers who helped with getting ready for the Library Giving Day. And then quick thanks also, of course, to Marianne for all she does for the library and community. Thanks so much.
without further ado, Matt, take it away.
Thank you, Elaine. Can everybody hear me? Brad, is this on? It's on. My name's Matt Odens. I'm a principal at Odens Ello Architecture in Boston. I have Dominic Witt and Porpla Kitasapkajan, I think I got it, with me tonight. They're part of our project team. As Elaine said, we're at the beginning of our design process. So this is really a first chance to show you what we've been doing and hopefully solicit some feedback from you to help guide us as we move forward. We are roughly 2 months into what's going to be about a year-long design phase for this building. So I just want to qualify that everything you see here tonight is very preliminary. There's a lot of work yet to do. These are not final designs, but they're a kind of idea of where we're heading. We've been developing 3 different schemes kind of at a schematic level. We're going to price all of them, we're going to price this at the end of schematic design, but we're going to show you all of them tonight. And so let me get into it. To talk first a little bit about the site. I know you are familiar with lot 032 on Leverett Road. This is just the front portion of the site. As you all know, it's a much longer site. It goes quite a ways back south from here. But what's important to note, the library will be located close to Leverett Road in this front portion of the site. And what is really notable is the wetlands, which you can see outlined here. I know this slide is a little bit difficult for you to read, but the wetland areas are outlined in white here, here, and here along this is the eastern side, western side, and this is Leverett Road here. The garage building that was taken down is right here, and I think there was a former house here, a little closer to Leverett. So the dashed lines that you see are the wetland buffers. This one is the 50-foot buffer from the wetland resource here and here. And then the fainter one is the 100-foot wetland buffer, again, from all 3 resources. You can see that the 100-foot wetland buffer overlaps roughly where that garage building was. Although this is a previously developed piece of the property, so having further development in that area in the context of the wetlands, we think is a reasonable approach. What this leads us to is the sort of expectation that really the best area for development of the new library is in this spot that's between the 200-foot buffers, certainly well out of the 50-foot buffers, with access then from Leverett Road coming in through here, which is roughly where the current entry from the driveway is now, off Leverett, and then coming straight back, sort of threading between the 50-foot wetland buffers back to the building and parking. Directly relevant, I think, to this project are 2 recent projects that we've done that I just wanted to talk a little bit about. This is a recent project completed in 2021 in the town of Norwell. Norwell as a town is about 50% wetlands. This is a much bigger building. It's a public library, 20,000 square feet on a single level, completely surrounded by wetlands. So the green line here represents the wetland resource, and then the other colors are various setbacks, with the blue being the 100-foot setback. So we had to locate a 20,000 square foot building in the middle of this wetland and actually come through the wetland to get to parking. There was a previous building on that site before with parking and driveway negotiating through the wetland. You can see the previous building relative to the footprint of the new building. A lot of the same kinds of things, the same ideas about stormwater management, how we deal with runoff, both from parking and driveway, but also from the building, were things that we really had to work hard at to figure out how to solve in a context like this where it's surrounded by wetlands. And that will be true of this project as well. And so really this is to say that we have that experience. This was a very successful project and a real collaboration with the local Concom. It turned out quite nicely. This is, in a similar way, this is a library that we completed in 2016 on Cape Cod. This is in the town of Eastham. A little bit different, but it's on a deep water kettle pond. So there was a lot of consideration about wetland protection of the pond. and restoration of a wetland buffer between the edge of the pond and the edge of the building. Originally, the parking lot used to occupy the space between the library and that pond. So we were able to relocate that to a new parcel that the town acquired, build really what amounted to about a 17,000 square foot addition to a 300 square foot historic original building, pushed up to the 100-foot buffer. So we got the bulk of the library as close to the view as possible without doing anything that was at odds with watershed protection for the pond. In addition, this is actually a net zero building, 100% on-site renewable energy. There's photovoltaic panels on the roof. The roofs were all designed, like in the previous project, to slope inward so that all of the rainwater from the roof is collected into a central rain garden. So it's directed to a sort of single place where it's easy to collect and treat and then filter back out into the surrounding site. And in addition, the single slope roof allowed us to cover the entire roof with photovoltaic panels. So we have enough solar panels on this to generate 100% of the energy. It's a fossil fuel free building, all electric, which is what we're planning for Shutesbury as well. So I wanted to bring those up just because I think there's a lot of kind of direct relevance to this project. So to talk about your project, this is a graphic summary of the building program. And I know it's difficult to read these titles, but at the start of a project, it's helpful for us to start to take a written program and translate that into a visual diagram so that we can use that to start moving pieces around on paper and thinking about adjacencies between certain groups of programming. We've grouped this into entry program, lobby, reception, meeting, community oriented meeting space, community meeting room, a study room, spaces that support the meeting room, outdoor covered space, staff spaces, adult program, and children and teen program. And then we use that to start to develop some building planning diagrams, which we'll see. So we have three options. This is the first. This is the outline of the building. In this case, it's a fairly simple bar building oriented in the east-west direction with the long side parallel to Leverett Road, which is here. So this is roughly the same view that you saw in the aerial before. In all three schemes, as I mentioned before, we're entering from Leverett with a new driveway back to parking. There will be a loop drive so that we can have an emergency vehicle parked here and still allow another emergency vehicle to get past and back out on the site. We are accommodating 16 stalls of parking, which is what we need for a building of this size. Again, you can see here dashed in red the 50-foot buffers. So we're staying out of the 50-foot buffer. But you can see how much area we need for building and parking, which is happening kind of in this sweet spot in between these various buffers. There will be a septic. There's no, as everybody knows, there are no municipal services here. So we'll have septic, we'll have well water. This will have to be a fully sprinklered building just by code. And so we'll also have to have underground water storage tanks to provide enough water capacity for fire protection system. We think that the septic fields, which is represented here, will have to be a raised septic field because of the high water table. That means it'll sit higher than natural grade and it'll be flat at the top. We'll have to berm up to it. We have located it in this northeast corner to try to get it out of the wetland buffers, but also away from the building, because having that grade differential between a raised septic and a building that's at grade is problematic. And so we're thinking that the best place for it is this northeast corner. We know that there's a domestic well in the neighboring property. We've approximated that location here. We're confirming that with a survey. This represents the 100-foot setback from that well. So we think there's adequate room to get the leaching field to work beyond the 100-foot setback. We also think that there's room here to co-locate the storage tank for the fire water. So this now is a diagram of the floor plan. So the graphic program that you saw earlier, we've sort of rearranged those pieces into a plan that organizes it into a fairly simple bar building with a covered porch at the entrance. And I'll just get right into the plan. But before I do, one of the things that we looked at in all of these buildings is the roof. And you know, we were thinking initially gable roof versus single slope roof, and we realized pretty quickly that the single slope roof offers a number of advantages. Number one, you can see here that only half of a gable roof that's facing south has roof area available for solar, whereas a single slope roof, 100% of that roof area is available for solar, which translates to about a 33% increase in area. It's not double the area of this side of the roof, but you can cover 100% of that roof with solar. So for that reason, we think there's a real advantage to having the entire roof oriented south. Another benefit is that when we think about rainwater with a gable roof, we're sending half of that rainwater to one side of the building and half to the other side. If you remember the orientation of the building, half of that rainwater is going into the wetland, half of it is going behind the library. If we do the single pitch roof, like you saw in those previous two examples I showed you, we can collect 100% of the roof runoff away from the wetland buffers in an area where it's easier to treat and send back out into the site. So in terms of building planning, I know it may be a little bit difficult for some of you to read the label, so I'll try to walk you through this. From parking, you come in underneath a covered exterior porch, which is along this lower right-hand side, into a vestibule and lobby. If you continue straight, there's the circulation desk, computers, and that's flanked by staff space on the left, director's office, staff workroom, storage, and then library user space on the right, a study room, teen room, and a restroom that is for family, but also staff. Adult and children collection areas are at the end of the building. And then down on the lower part of the building is the community wing. So you have a 50-seat meeting room supported by a kitchen, table and chair storage, small book drop, AV room. Public restrooms are directly off the lobby. There's direct access from meeting out to a covered outdoor program space. And then the building services are at the end, electric room, fire pump, et cetera. One thing that we try very hard in all of our designs to do, and all of these schemes represent this in one way or another, the blue toned area shows everything that's available off hours. So if there's a program in the meeting room, you still would come in the same front door. There isn't a separate entrance. You still would have access to the lobby. There would be a secure line here. We'd be able to pull a secure grill across that allows the library to be locked, but still have access to lobby, bathrooms, meeting room, outdoor space, and all of the spaces that support that. These, again, I can't reiterate enough, these are extremely schematic, but this gives you a general idea of what this might look like from Leverett Road in terms of its size. So this is, you can see a key plan here. This is the limit of the site. This is the building on that site. So it's relative to the site, it's quite small. And then this view is taken from the northwest corner of the site, looking back towards the rear of the property. In all of these, we're imagining a building that's a heavy timber construction. Mass timber is a great choice for a whole variety of reasons. It sequesters carbon. It's efficient to build. It's all engineered off-site, milled off-site, and then erected fairly quickly on-site. Both of the examples that I showed you earlier, the Norwell Library and the Eastham Library, were both heavy timber construction. There's the ability to expose it, and so we don't have to pay for additional layers of stuff to conceal it, like if it was a steel building or so there are a lot of advantages, and there's just a really nice kind of aesthetic appeal, we think, to a natural wood, exposed natural wood structure. This is a view then from the entry drive, which you can see here, looking towards the front porch. This is the entry vestibule and lobby. The adult and children collection rooms are down at the far end. Meeting room is at this end. There, you can't see it from this view, but there would be direct access to the back to a covered outdoor program space on the back side. The second option takes that same diagram and rotates it 90 degrees on the site, in this case parallel to parking, with the short end facing Leverett Road. All other aspects of the site are the same. General organization here, very similar to the last one, with adults and children at one end, meeting room at the other end, access to covered outdoor program space. In this case, because we still want to maintain that south orientation, we would slope the roof from north to south. So if I just back up here for a minute, that's sloping from high at this end down to lower at this end. So this whole area, this whole roof area, again, would be covered with photovoltaic panels, which we think will give us enough square footage and therefore enough yield to achieve net zero. We're also, again, collecting all the rainwater down at this end. One of the things that we will study is whether or not there's an opportunity to actually collect the rainwater, reuse it for irrigation or some other purposes. But it will be easier to manage down at this end of the building. The other thing is that in the middle here, where meeting room would be open to structure above, lobby open to structure above, and the reading rooms also open to the wood structure above. Where we have smaller rooms like staff offices, bathrooms, we have the opportunity to tuck attic mechanical space. As I said, this will be an all-electric building, probably a VRF system, which is a kind of commercial grade heat pump system. The advantage is that the equipment is very small and we can locate it, sort of spread the equipment out throughout the building. And so most of the mechanical equipment we think can fit in attic space in any one of these schemes, with some small units outside the building. Again, there is the plan that you would enter into this porch directly from parking into a vestibule and lobby with access to the meeting room, covered outdoor program area, restrooms, et cetera, off hours. So all of that blue tone is off hours access. Turning right, you have the circulation desk, computers, adult room, children's room, study and teens, director's office, and staff workroom. In this one, the storage is actually located very close to parking. So depending on what items are stored there, it's easy access from the parking lot. And in this one, you could potentially come straight through and out to landscaped outdoor program area, reading garden. And then this is a view again from that same northwest corner of Leverett Road. You can see the roof sloping from high at the north down to lower at the south. The main reading rooms facing the meadow in front and Leverett Road. This is the lobby here and the covered outdoor program area here. And then a view from the entry drive. This is the entry porch into the lobby. Some of the smaller rooms in the middle with attic space above, and then the larger reading rooms at the end, meeting room and covered outdoor space down at this end. And then the third scheme that we looked at was a bent bar, an L-shaped scheme. The nice thing about this is that it starts to kind of define outdoor space. It shields that space somewhat from parking, although not quite as well as the previous scheme did. That was a nice thing about the previous option, that the building really creates a strong separation between parking on one side and then the landscape on the opposite side. In this one, you enter into a corner porch, straight into a lobby with circulation, moving through into children and adult spaces. To the left, you have meeting room and covered outdoor space, staff space behind the circulation desk. There's a study room in the corner and teens adjacent to adults. Like the previous schemes, this has an area that is available off hours. In this case, the study room also falls within that area, so could double as a small meeting space off hours in addition to the larger 50-seat meeting space. Why that is missing? Hang on. Apologies, I don't know why that image isn't showing up. Well, doesn't seem to be there, but we have this one. So this is a view of that L-shaped scheme from the entry drive with a covered porch, entry lobby, smaller program spaces, adult reading room down at this end, a covered outdoor space from the meeting room is down at the opposite end. And then a summary again, I don't know why that image doesn't want to show up, but so this is a summary of the three schemes. The plans are oriented towards Leverett Road. So in all of these, Leverett Road is parallel to the building. Leverett Road is parallel to the short end. Leverett Road parallel to this wing. So views from the north west corner and then views from the entry drive along the bottom. In terms of square footage, we have two numbers here, the net square footage and gross square footage. Net square footage is all of the program that is directly contributing to the library functions. So reading rooms, offices, study rooms, et cetera. The gross square footage number includes other things like circulation space, storage rooms, bathrooms. So gross square footage is always higher than net square footage. But if we compare these three projects, they're all within, and again, this is schematic design, so we are a long way to go in terms of fine tuning the design. But if we look at the gross square footage, they're all in the kind of 6,000 square foot range. 6,000 square feet is our target for the gross square footage. They are all, again, fairly close in net square footage. They're all a little bit bigger than the program. So in all cases, we're working to tighten up the numbers. But generally speaking, they're kind of where relative to each other, they're roughly equal for our purposes at this level of schematic design. I know you can't read the schedule, but I want to just talk through it quickly. We are here at sort of the end of this pink shaded area. So we're 2 months into a 3-month initial schematic design period. We've got another month to go working with our consultants to develop pricing documents that will go to our cost estimator at the end of April. He will then develop a detailed schematic design cost estimate over a 2 to 3 week period. And that will be for preferred scheme 1 of the 3 schemes that we showed you tonight. Then we'll start a 3-month design development phase, which is when we get into more specifics about materials, building systems, structural systems, et cetera. That's 3 months with another pricing exercise. And then we have a 4.5-month construction document period, which is where we're really getting down to details and developing a set of bid documents that ultimately will be produced by the end of 2024 or end of 2023, early 2024, followed by a roughly 2-month bid period, and then start construction in early 2024 with a 12 to 14-month construction duration, we think. So opening, we're anticipating spring of 2025. And we're here. So you can see there's a lot left to do to turn this into a real building. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that anybody has. Yes, please.
Wheezy Hole, West Pelham Road. I guess it's loud enough. Could you go back to that last slide that had all 3 designs on them, please? So we're having a sidebar conversation over here, and we're wondering if design 1 and design 3 have a similar window end look as number 2. We don't see it on those 2 other views. So is there the same amount of windows on the children's end and the adult as that one?
There is, and again, it's
I know.
early, but yes, the 3 schemes are roughly equivalent in size, in sort of expression, glazing versus solid wall, et cetera. So yeah, the end of option 1 and this end of option 3 would be similar in terms of glazing to the end of option 2. Yes.
Hi, Frank McGinn, South Laurel Drive. Coming from to this town with a lot, I came from municipalities that had sewer and water. And one thing I've noticed that's in none of your schematics showing the front view is the ugly mound, septic mound, and the fancy candy canes. Is there any way to put it deeper in the property so it's not in the front? Because that's past the wetlands, and to me, it just makes, if you want to show the library off, all you're going to show is the septic distribution.
Yeah, let me back up actually to the site plan. So in these views, that septic field would be sort of over here somewhere.
It's still right on the street, and it's huge, and it's got the candy cane. So that's my only question. Can you get it behind the building, deeper in the property?
We have not looked at putting it back here. I think it's possible. One advantage to putting it in the front is that we have gravity working for us. This is actually downhill from the building. So if it's behind the building, we have to pump. And if it's behind the building, it's got to go quite far behind the building to get on the other side of the wetland. So it's conceivable, and we can have that conversation with our civil engineer to see what they think.
I think that mound's gonna be
No, it won't be that tall. It'll be 2 to 3 feet above natural grade. We are also planning in a 20 to 30 foot buffer, and it's in this orientation, it's not parallel to the street. So we're planning on a fairly dense vegetated buffer at that corner and probably wrapping around to here. The downhill side are these two. This would be the uphill side. So it will stick out of the ground less here than it does here, but we can feather out the grade there too and landscape that. We can't do much more than grass on top. The candy cane vents, I think we can manage because they can get tucked into the vegetative buffer around it. And we'll have the same thing, by the way, with the underground water storage tank. And we've managed that. We did a project on the vineyard that had a similar setup, and we were able to put the candy canes in an area where it was concealed with vegetation. The one thing that we have talked about on the septic field is the potential for raised planting beds. We can't dig down into it, but you can put a planting bed on top of it. So as an example, community garden plots could go on top. They did that at the Hitchcock Center, not far away. If you've been out there, they have a raised septic there as well. And they did community garden beds on top of that. Yes.
I see there's a hand up on the webinar. I would like people to remember that you cannot ask a question on the webinar. So if you have a question, please go to livebuild@shutesbury.org and we will answer your questions from there. Thank you.
And live and in person. Michael Dick here. I just had two questions. On the previous slide, you had mentioned the 100-foot distance from the neighbor's well. So how does that get determined? Is that enough distance? And then my other real question before I saw this slide was, maybe Mary Ann knows this, if you don't, what's the square footage storage for the stacks? Like, what do we have now versus what's our gain, just for comparative?
So let me take the first question first. We are waiting for a precise location of that well from a surveyor, but anecdotally, we have heard that it is in front of the garage in the driveway of the neighboring house. So that's where we've located it in this plan here. This red line is the 100-foot buffer from that potential well location. We've got some wiggle room. We also think that the septic field will likely be smaller than what we're showing here once we do the final daily flow counts for this building. But we feel like there's a comfortable amount of room here to be outside of that 100-foot buffer. So that's the well question. In terms of collection, between the adult and children areas, they're combined, they're roughly 2,000 square feet. The existing building is what, 300 square feet?
Total 900 square.
Total is 900? Is it really?
Not the stairs.
Yeah.
Not the stacks, the whole building.
Yeah.
Okay.
945.
And so do you have any idea what the stack area is? I mean, most of it is stacks.
Yeah, most of it is stacks. I don't know off the top of my head, but I would say that the collection, we planned for about double the amount of collection, but it won't be all crammed in. Right?
So, that's right. So the plan for the collection is that we, to the greatest extent possible, will have high shelving around the perimeter and low shelving in the middle of the room. So we don't want to walk into a stack area and have, 7-foot shelving everywhere. It makes it difficult to see. It's harder to supervise. It's harder for library users to find their way or keep an eye on their kids. And so that's the hope. And so it takes more area to accommodate the same size collection in order to do that. But it sounds like roughly we're doubling the square footage of the stack area and the collection.
A webinar question is from Mike Vinsky. Who will select which option to move forward with, and when will that decision be made? I'll answer that one. The Library Building Committee is the body that will select which option to move forward, and we hope to do that either tonight or at our meeting on Tuesday next week. Oh, I have a couple other questions here. How high will the ceiling be in option 1 and 2 at the north end of the building?
So in all of these, we're planning on the highest point of the building being around 18 feet to the underside of structure. So that's, really at the end of the, if I can go back to this slide, the comparison. So, the high point here, and here, really along that whole edge. The plan is that be about 18 feet to the underside of structure. If you remember the previous two examples I showed you, the Norwell Library and the Eastham Library, those reading rooms are a similar scale. I can go back to this.
While you're going back, I'll read one more question. What is the reason for a private staff toilet in the library?
It's actually a shared toilet, shared between staff and family. There we go. All right, I've got to go back a ways. So this is the Norwell Library. So that high point is about 18 feet here and here. The Eastham Library, similar at the main reading room. That's about 18 feet to the underside. And it's not, it's a sloping roof. So it's not 18 feet throughout. And there are areas that have a lower ceiling. The circulation desk has a lower ceiling over it with attic space above. So, just again, to skip ahead to one of the plans as an example, I think this one shows it pretty well. So the meeting room here would be open to structure above, so a high space, as would the lobby and the children and adult rooms. All of the kind of smaller rooms, bathrooms, electric, storage, study room, teen room, actually this whole middle area has a lower ceiling in it. So you enter from a lower porch into a taller space. So there's a little bit of drama here, then into a lower ceiling space, and then emerge out again into a taller space. So there's variety throughout the building. Smaller rooms have a smaller feeling. They have a more intimate scale. The larger rooms have more volume to them.
Question from Linda Seidman. What will be the noise protection between children room and adult room? Do they have to be next to each other?
We have talked about this in the building committee meetings, and we do think that they need to be next to each other for a variety of reasons. In terms of noise separation, we've also talked about that, and we've gone back and forth about the merits of an enclosed children's room versus an open one. And I think the general preference is that it be open and have the flow from one to the other be as fluid and easy as possible. That said, acoustic control is something that we take seriously, and we will be looking for ways to provide sound absorptive material in all of the spaces. In the spaces where it's exposed wood structure, we'll want to do that in a way that it doesn't detract from the exposed wood. And we've done that in a couple of different ways in past projects. That goes a long way towards reducing the noise level, right? It absorbs sound in the space. In this scheme, we actually introduced a dividing wall between the two with stacks on both sides for adults and children. There is an opening here, but if these are full height up to structure, that provides some separation between them without having the rooms be fully separated and enclosed. So we're trying to find a kind of middle ground solution.
And I think some of that also is for the safety factor of the children and having them be near their parents and not be in a totally different part of the room. And if there is a time when we have a story hour and the library's open, the story hour can happen either in the meeting room or in the small study room, so that it is not something that parents or adults who aren't parents have to listen to the story.
I just have a comment before my question. Living in a house with a shed roof, like you're talking about here, where the tall one is about 15 feet, it's really hard to get those cobwebs down. And I mean, really hard. Just thinking about it. But anyway, is this building going to be on a slab?
It will be slab on grade. Yeah, no basement is planned.
So what would you do to make it so that it's not hard on the feet of people who are there all day, every day? And especially the meeting room, if we have like dance class or something like that, you can't dance on concrete slab.
So what we have typically done in meeting rooms, and we haven't gotten into this level of discussion or design thinking yet, but I can tell you on other projects, for meeting rooms in particular, we usually depress the slab down lower than the slab in the rest of the building, enough to put in a floating wood floor. And that floating wood floor incorporates resilient pads under the strapping, so it gives you a little bit of cushion. It's a much more pleasant floor to be on for those kinds of activities.
Yes, indeed.
Similarly, we usually do a resilient rubber floor behind the circulation desk. So in an area where staff is often on their feet for long periods of time, there's a little more cushion to that material. Elsewhere in the library, we will likely have carpet. The carpet we usually specify with a thicker carpet pad. So again, you're not walking on concrete. So I think there are a number of ways that we can try to address that.
Thank you.
Another question from the webinar: which plan can offer the best oversight by the librarian, taking sight lines into account?
Marianne, do you want to answer that one?
I think all three attempt that. And I think it's early in design phase. I think number 1 and number 2 do a little bit better job at sight lines, but I think that all three, let's see number 3 again. Number 3 is a little bit harder, but all three we've been talking about sight lines as we've been getting to this point. Okay.
In all of them, the circ desk is located centrally as possible. So as Marianne said, the circ desk here in option 1 and here in option 2 has good sight lines down the length of the building, as well as eyes on the public restrooms and directly across to the teen room and study room. So the visual supervision is, I think, quite good actually in both of those plans.
And people should just, every once in a while, see hands up. Come on up to the mic. Okay, please.
Steve Bressler, 43 Old Orchard Road. I really appreciate all the work you guys have done to get to this point schematic. I know well how many variables you're juggling just to get where you are as far as site, site plan, the roof, the space, the program. My question though is there have you considered any other option for the roof? I understand you can't do gable because of the inefficiency, solar inefficiency, but have you considered any other roof line that might feel like it fits, in my mind, in a little bit better with the town?
I mean, we've wanted in all cases to keep the roof lines as simple as possible, partly because we want a nice sort of clean canvas for solar, but also for cost reasons, right? We're trying to be as efficient as we can with cost, and so we don't want a complicated roof scape.
But how about a simple roof like salt box shape, which still has a nice, could have a nice southern exposure, a little bit of this is in my mind, and I know aesthetics are very personal, but I would love to see a library that somehow feels like just roof line. It somehow reflects Shutesbury a little bit. I'm not seeing that here, but I understand what you're wrestling with. And then the only other question I have is consideration as you move forward. And I know architects love glass. I've worked with lots of architects. We may not need quite that much glass because it has to be cleaned.
Thank you. There's a lot of work to do on the exterior elevations for sure. One of the things that we'll be doing as part of the design process is conducting an energy model of the building, and that will also influence how much glazing we have versus how much solid wall, trying to balance out thermal performance for the envelope. So all of those things go into it. But the other thing I want to mention in terms of glass is in all of our projects, we try to maximize the amount of natural light for a variety of reasons. One, it makes for a much more pleasant space to be in. But two, the more natural light you have, the less dependent you are on artificial light. And so usually what we incorporate into the design is a daylight dimming system. Sometimes you hear it called a daylight harvesting system. Basically, it's sensors that sense the amount of ambient natural light, and they dim the artificial lighting in response to that available natural light. And so in most of our projects, we see a pretty dramatic reduction in energy usage related to lighting as a result. So it's a balance.
Hi, Susie Mosier. One of the words you've been using is clean, and I'm not saying that Shutesbury people aren't clean, but there aren't any people, there's no people feeling to this. We have a sandbox, we have picnic tables, we have places that people come and go from the library that are very social. And one of the concepts was the covered porch as a way of having people be at the library without having to be inside, especially when you have a kid's room and you say, go outside, you have them outside to send them to. So I have some of the same feelings that Steve just mentioned, that this looks clean and there's a lot of line, but I'm wondering if somehow the places where people are present outside the library could be more designed in to help soften the lines of the building and represent what a library is for this town, which is a place for people to be.
Thank you. It's a great point, and I would say at this point it has everything to do with representation. You know, they're diagrammatic views of the building. So and we haven't designed, frankly, any of the landscape yet. You know, we have been meeting with our landscape consultant and our civil engineer, primarily geared toward getting things in the right places, making sure that parking works and we can accommodate emergency vehicles and that septic is accommodated. All of those things are kind of in the right place relative to the building. We haven't yet talked about what the character is of the landscape around the building, but we take that very seriously. And actually, well before COVID, our office has been focused on strong connections between indoors and outdoors. We think that that's an incredibly important thing for buildings and for the occupants that use those buildings. That has proven to be beneficial in a post-pandemic world too. Having access to usable outdoor space that is pleasant to be in, that's useful. I think the covered outdoor program area in particular will be, a tremendous asset to a building, irrespective of COVID. And those are spaces also that in the off season, when you can't use them, you're looking at them. And so we want to think about what those are like. None of that is represented in these images because of where we are in the design, but they will be. Sure, yeah.
While you're going back to Norwell, I'm going to ask 2 out of 3 questions from Amanda Alex. Why are these buildings so tall? Assume they are 1 story.
They are all 1 story, single story slab on grade. They're tall because they are public buildings, and they're public buildings of a certain size. I think it's a 5,000 square foot building, which is considerably smaller than this project, which is a 20,000 square foot building. But it's bigger than your average house, and it should feel different than your average house. It should feel like a special civic building. And so, and the size of the rooms are unlike rooms that you find in your house. The adult reading room or the children's reading room is much bigger in plan than any room in anybody's house. And so to put in a ceiling that's, 10 feet would feel, I think, oppressive in a room that size. And so we try to balance out the scale of the space relative to the footprint. This is the Norwell Library we see.
Could you please, go to the microphone, please? Could you go to the microphone, please, so that the people on the webinar can hear you?
Just learn to see the outside of this finished building rather than the drawings. It has more warmth to it, and we can get a sense of the finished product.
Yeah, so this building was organized around a central reading garden / stormwater management garden, right? There's a rain garden kind of tucked into the corner here, so all the roof runoff is coming down into this area, but it's also a pleasant space to be in. There's a patio, there's seating, there will be a shade tree as that matures. And the spaces are organized around it, so you can access it easily. You're always referencing it visually. It's a nice space to look at year round. This also has, some thoughtful connections down. This is a different type of site. It's a hilly site, so this has a lower level that has access out directly to grade. Children, in this case, are located at the lower level, so they have direct access out to outdoor children's space for outdoor programming, story time, activities, etc. And we wanted to make sure that people had a way to get to those spaces as well. So there's a path that takes you down around to the pond side of the building. So, I think that is, to Weesley's point, the kind of thought that will go into this project as well in terms of what's happening around all 4 sides. And what we find is that this building type, especially in a more rural location like this site, these are buildings that don't have backs, right? So, an urban building usually has a back. There's an alley, or there's a service road, or there's a party wall, or there's some space that is less important than the other spaces. But a building like this in a rural location, all of those sides are visible, all of them are important, and so is the landscape around them and the way the building relates. So I think that's something that's unique to this building type in this kind of setting.
Hi, Eric Stalker on New Boston Road, from New Boston Road. Just wondering if, I know it's super early in the deal, but do you have a sense of if any of these particular models are more expensive to build than the others? And then I guess a related comment would be that it would seem like option 1, what do I know about building? But I've seen option 1 is the simplest structure, and it gives us the most square feet, usable square feet. So I would just throw that out there, that comment and that question.
So we don't know the cost of any of these yet because we won't price it until we're at the end of the schematic design phase, which is about a month from now. At that point, we'll have obviously a much better idea of cost. But I can say that they all have the same program, roughly. They're roughly the same size. There's a little bit of discrepancy now. But I would say that, you know, kind of all things being equal, they're roughly the same cost to build. Option 3 might be a little bit more expensive because it's a slightly more complicated foundation. It's not just a rectilinear foundation. It's got a roof that has a valley in it. And so it's a slightly more complicated roof. But, you know, the structure is the same. The materials would be the same. It's still slab on grade. The site work is the same in all 3. So I think really you could say that they're all roughly the same cost. You mentioned option 1 being bigger. It's too big right now by about 600 square feet. We want to get down to the 6,000 square foot target. You know, given cost per square foot these days, we want to make sure that we're being as tight as we can with the building area. And so the plan is to get down to 6,000 square feet gross building area so that we're not burdening the project by having more square footage.
Hi, quick question. Do all 3 of these designs have some opportunity for overflow parking? Seems like, I think you said 15 stalls?
16 stalls is
16.
what's represented here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking that there may occasionally be special events that might require more than that.
I mean, we've touched on overflow parking a little bit. We haven't really gotten into that discussion yet. I think in any of these, it's a possibility. And the way that we would probably suggest doing that is not more paved area. We would do like a reinforced turf where there's a kind of structural admixture that gets mixed in with the soil that allows it to bear weight. We do this a lot of times for emergency vehicle areas where a fire truck needs to pull up close to a building, but we don't want to have paving. So I think there are opportunities like that to accommodate additional parking. There's certainly space for it. I think the biggest challenge will be finding an area that works with the wetland buffers.
A question from the webinar some of the questions that I'm not asking, I think were addressed. And please, if you're on the webinar and you think that your question wasn't addressed, please just send me a quick email and I will get back to it. This other one says, does one plan provide the most flexibility for rearranging the layout if adjustments are needed in the future, perhaps folding walls?
I would say they're all sort of equivalent in that standpoint. I mean, the advantage that we have here is that the main kind of children and adult area is a pretty good size open area that could be repurposed down the road. And I think that's true really of all of the library buildings that we do. It's more difficult to rearrange walls in the smaller spaces, but that doesn't mean that they can't be used for different things. You know, a study room could get converted to a maker space or, you know, or office space, or you could create more meeting space. So I think there are ways for buildings to adapt over time. I know that one of the things that the MBLC stresses often is mobile shelving in the right application so that you have, even in its current incarnation, you have some flexibility in terms of arrangement. So I don't know if that answered the question.
If it didn't answer the question, you could re-ask it.
Cliff Reed, Old Orchard Road. I'd like to say thanks too for all of the different schematics that you've brought here tonight. It's very exciting to see this, and obviously a lot of work, but also to recognize the amazing work that the Library Building Committee has done, the library trustees, the Friends, and especially Mary Ann. So thank you all. I have one question and one question comment. The first question is, with the lower pitch to that roof, are there issues with solar? I understand trying to maximize solar on that, but it seems like it's a very low grade. Obviously, you don't want to make it too high in pitch, that raises it up even more. But are there issues with it being at its current pitch for that? The other comment question that I have is, our current library is a 120-year-old building, and it is quaint but small and inadequate. And so this is exciting to see these opportunities before us. However, that building is the library, and it speaks very much to that. With the character of that building, it has a lot of character. And not that I want to see a new library basically be a larger version of what we have currently, but are there ways to take different elements of that building and incorporate it into the design in any way, and just keeping a little bit of that character and that connection with the original building that was built thanks to M.N. Spear back in the early 1900s?
I don't know if there are ways to literally take elements from that building and apply them to this. I suspect not, but that's not to say that we can't continue to work on the character of this building. I think that, we want to be careful about not trying to replicate something that is from 1900, which at the time was a contemporary building, right? That, who knows if that was seen as everyone in town as quaint and charming because it looked like buildings from 100 years ago. I suspect not. And so we want this to be a forward-looking building. We want it to talk about, the library of the future. At the same time, we want it to fit well in the town. And I think the answer, I would say, is similar to the one I gave about the landscape. And that is, there's a lot yet to design here, and a lot to consider. And I think as we get into specifics of materiality and how those materials are applied to the building, working out different details like roof edges and overhangs and porches and things like that, I think that more of that kind of character will come out. And so I think you will see some of that as we develop the designs. I can't promise that it will be, something that you look at and say, oh, that's just like something from the M.N. Spear Library. But I understand the point of the question.
Another question from the webinar. With so much wetland surrounding the library site, what expectation do you have for using outdoor space and encountering mosquitoes and other insects? Well, I think we can all answer that with our own backyards, can't we? I think we will have to do some mosquito management with plantings and maybe whatever kind of smudge pots, whatever. I don't know. Birds.
We
Birds.
will be having conversations with our landscape architect about different plants. Obviously, we want native plants. We want drought tolerant plants, but we also want plants that are potentially pollinators. We want plants that attract different types of wildlife. And I think if we can get the right mix, then, hopefully some of the mosquito population is managed that way. But I think we want to provide a mix that is providing a kind of rich diversity on this site. There's already actually a pretty nice, pretty rich biodiversity of vegetation on that site. So I think we want to enhance that with whatever we do.
Has there been any thought to using permeable material for the parking area?
We have talked about permeable material. I can tell you that permeable asphalt, which some people may know about, is a great product if it's maintained. It's very difficult to maintain. It has to be vacuumed. As soon as you throw sand out in the winter, the pores clog. Unless it's vacuumed and swept routinely throughout the year, it doesn't continue to percolate anymore. So it's expensive and it doesn't tend to work very well unless you put in the maintenance. And then unit pavers that are pervious, like precast pavers systems, tend to be quite expensive. So what we think is probably the most cost-effective solution is to use asphalt. It's easy to maintain. You can plow it, but make sure that we're managing stormwater runoff from parking as efficiently as possible. And if I go back to a site plan for a minute, so you can see here, we're providing a loop turnaround for emergency vehicle and actually for patron use as well. This whole area here we're imagining is a bioretention area, so rain garden, heavily vegetated, kind of constructed wetland. So all of the runoff from parking and from the surrounding driveway would be sloped to go into that space, and that provides enough storage capacity for those plants to filter that water before it is released back out into the groundwater. Along the driveway, we will have to have kind of longer vegetated swale that effectively does the same thing. But we think that the most cost-effective thing is going to be asphalt. It's easy to maintain, it's a lower cost, and then manage stormwater as well as we can.
So I just wanted to remind you Bostonians something. My daughter just moved out east, and it was quite shocking to see that they got 0 inches of snow when we got 2 feet.
Yeah.
And to point taken about the slope, we still have snow in our yard across the street. So yeah, I kind of agree. Make sure we got solar panels.
So we've done solar panels on a low pitch roof. The Eastham roof is a 1 in 12 pitch and has solar on the entire roof, and it's generating 100% of their electric costs. And it snows in Eastham too, not as much as here.
But we're over 1,000 feet, and that was a very special freak storm that
Yes,
happens
I know.
every now and again up here.
We know that snow needs to be managed in New England, and we're thinking about that as well as managing rainwater. But in the context of the solar, that's why we have a solar consultant on our team to help advise us.
So regarding the new location on Lot 032, the town commissioned a feasibility study by the Conway School of Landscape Architecture in May 2019. From the information in that report, the only area that would provide a productive solar PV array is in the northeast corner. Will the new location be acceptable? The study notes that the further back from the road, the wetter the parcel with seasonal inundation. Will the new location cause more problems with runoff from the paved areas that could impact the abutters?
That's 2 questions, sorry.
Yeah, so the first question, we don't think that the only place on the site that is going to be able to generate solar power is that front portion. I think that, we're looking at some clearing on the site, obviously, to make room for a 6,000 square foot library and a parking area for 16 cars, plus turnaround for emergency vehicles. So, if we look at this green dashed line around the kind of area of disturbance, we are going to be removing vegetation here. That's not to say it's going to be completely denuded of vegetation. We are going to be putting things back as well. But what it means is that we can create some distance between the library and adjacent tree cover to the extent that I think we can manage shade from adjacent trees in terms of energy production. So that was question number 1. In terms of question number 2, yes, it's a wet site, and that just means we have to approach things in a different way than we would on a dry, sandy site. We have a high water table. It means that things don't infiltrate as quickly as they would elsewhere. And so we have to make sure that we're providing enough storage area so that that process is much slower than it would be in a dry site. But it's not that much different in terms of the way we handle it. The Norwell Library, which I showed you, is very similar in terms of its soil characteristics. when we started that project, the original building routinely had standing water around the perimeter. The water table was in some places, 12 inches below surface. It was very high. And we were still able, with a 20,000 square foot building on a single level, to manage all of the roof runoff and all of the parking runoff for I think in that case, a 50-car parking lot in a wetland site that had a very high water table. So I have total confidence that we can solve that problem on this site.
Does one of the designs provide the most accessibility to window views for library users who are sitting and reading or otherwise using the building?
I think all three strive to do that. I think, as I said before, natural light is important, as are views, and we want to make sure that not only is there a way for people inside the library to look out, but also for people driving by to see what's happening in the library. Libraries are such a critical part of community life and engagement that I think that kind of reciprocity, the sort of visual reciprocity between being outside and looking in and vice versa, is really important. And so building orientation, having views that let you see inside the building, we think is valuable for the town. And likewise, we want people inside to have opportunities to see outside. We also try to provide different scale spaces. And while the reading rooms may be big, we also generally try to create moments that are more intimate, a study carrel that has a smaller window, so that even though you're in a big room, if you're at that study carrel and you have your own window and your own desk lamp, you feel a little bit more sort of out of the activity of the main room, and a kind of eddy, along the periphery. So we try to create a variety of scales inside the building.
Hi, Paul Lyons, Old Orchard Road. I know, Matt, you said that you'll be doing some energy analyses later on, but a decision will be made really soon about which option to go with. And, just looking at like all the north-facing windows in option 2 versus the potential for, I assume, lots of solar gain for option 1 on the south side. I'm wondering if you've done at least any crude, relative analyses from an energy efficiency standpoint on the three options that, might help with the decision-making that has to happen soon.
We have not, but we will as part of the schematic design exercise. I think that we will find, just looking at them sort of intuitively, I think we'll find that they all perform roughly the same. They have the same amount of wall area, the same amount of glazing, so the thermal performance is going to be the same. Orientation factors in, but they all have north-facing glazing. The advantage of north-facing glazing is that it brings in a lot of indirect light without the need for passive solar control. So, if we can deal with the thermal condition of the glazing and balance the thermal performance of windows and wall, that's actually a really beneficial orientation for glazing, because it's not harsh light, it's indirect light, doesn't require additional shades, whereas south light or some of the other more west light in the afternoon can be challenging at times. So I don't think that there's going to be a measurable difference, frankly, in terms of performance between any of these three. I think they're all roughly on par with each other.
Since this is a zero energy building, I imagine a tight building. Will the carpeting be made of organic and natural materials without outgassing toxins?
Yeah, we will be looking for zero VOC materials, and low or no off-gassing for all the materials, and that's that's something that we're routinely doing on our projects. We're not pursuing LEED certification on this one, but when we do, that's something that we are routinely doing and getting that credit. So I'm confident that we can provide materials that are not, giving off harmful toxins. We'll be using, I think, the industry really has switched to water-based adhesives for most flooring products for that reason. So it's much easier now. The availability of those types of products is much better than it was, 10 years ago.
Last opportunity for questions. I don't see any more on the webinar request. And so if anybody is emailing questions in, please do it within the next 2 or 3 minutes, because otherwise we're wrapping up soon. But I know we have people still here in the meeting, and I just got another question. Okay.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Wallace. I live on Pine Drive. And I don't know if this is a fair question or not, and you tell me to sit down, but since the building committee is going to decide soon, is it fair to ask, do you have a favorite?
Maybe we each do.
Do you want to know ours?
Well, of course we're going to want to know yours, but.
I have kind of a related question. Hi, AJ Cashew, 35 Hidden Meadow Road. I'm wondering if you might be able to just kind of high level summary, just speak to some of the trade-offs between these 3 designs. I'm sort of hearing about this for the first time and seeing this level of detail. It's a little bit difficult for me to really differentiate. I mean, they seem, the things they share in common seem to be numerous, and it's like, it's making it a little hard for me to kind of differentiate like what some of those trade-off kinds of decisions that were made.
So let's start with building program. They all accommodate the same building program. So I would say they're equal in that regard. But there are nuances to that. So we talked about sight lines earlier. So the sight lines in options 1 and 2, in terms of visual oversight by a small staff, are better than the sight lines in option 3. The sight lines in option 3 are not terrible, but the other 2 are better. I think similarly, the site plans are all fairly similar, right? The parking is handled the same way, the driveway, septic, but the building orientation changes. And I think there are things that distinguish each of them in that regard. So option 1, as you can see from the images on the left, presents a long face to Leverett Road, and it creates a very clear distinction between what's in front of the building and what's happening behind the building. It doesn't do as good a job as option 2, for instance, of creating that separation between parking and what's happening behind the building. So for that reason, I think option 2, the site plan, rotating it so that it's perpendicular to the street, it's still pretty dynamic as seen from Leverett Road. You see the long side, but it's not just kind of a wall. It recedes as it moves away from the site. So it has a scale that's a little bit, frankly, more interesting than options 1 and 3 for that reason, I think. It also does a really good job because it's oriented parallel to parking. It's very easy to get into the building from parking. So there's a kind of immediacy there that I think is good. And it creates a very good separation between the vehicular side of the building and the pedestrian side of the building, the reading garden. So that, I think having that separation between vehicles and kind of quiet outdoor space is a benefit. Option 3 does that too, because the 2 legs of the L start to kind of embrace that outdoor space, and it creates, a space that maybe has more definition to it. Although I think a lot of what that space ultimately is comes down to how it's landscaped, and you can create outdoor rooms with vegetation too, not just with building walls. So we feel confident that we can create a kind of intimate scale to outdoor program space, regardless of whether that's that kind of enclosure is created by vegetation or building. Option 3, like option 2, provides a little bit of separation between parking and that landscape space by virtue of the community wing. So in this scheme, parking is over here, but it sort of slips beyond because this is shorter than this is. Whereas I think we have a pretty good shot at getting a lot of the parking to happen sort of alongside option 2. So I don't know if that helps you.
Okay, Laura wants to address this question, so I'm gonna bring this microphone over to her. And I do see that there are webinar questions that we will address.
I just wanted to say that at the MBLC, we primarily look at functionality and efficiency of a design. We don't look at technical aspects or materials or any of the, or aesthetics. But we subjected these 3 floor plans to the initial review that we always give to every floor plan that are submitted to us. And my colleague Andrea and I both agree that scheme 2 is the most efficient, functional, and effective floor plan. And if you want me to go into details, I'm happy to do that. But I think they are all functional and workable. It's just that scheme 2 is slightly, the sight lines are better, the efficiencies are better. It's a smaller, the square footage is smaller. It just seems to work the best at this point. And as Matt has said, there is a long way to go, and any of the plans could work with some finagling.
Another email question was, did we address the expandability of the meeting room in case of overflow crowd for certain meetings?
So we have talked about that, and that is a challenging aspect of the design. And I would say that these 3 schemes achieve some level of that to varying degrees. Option 1, I don't know if you guys can read this. Maybe I'll back up to the individual plans. So starting with option 1, there's a lot of stuff in option 1 between the meeting room and the lobby, and that's stuff that we need there. Bathrooms, a kitchen that serves the meeting room, the book drop, which has to be close to the entrance. We have an AV storage room, which supports the meeting room. Some of those things, the bathrooms really can't move. They need to stay central and accessible to the main public space. The kitchen, the AV room, theoretically could move further down into this block, which would reduce the depth, but we're always going to have some program between the lobby and the meeting room. And so, although this is wide, this is about a 12-foot wide space between the meeting room and the lobby, and we could look at different ways of managing those doors. There is some ability to spill out from the back of the meeting room into adjacent space, but it's not like the whole back of the meeting room opens into the lobby. If we look at option 2, by comparison, similar, we still have the bathrooms adjacent to the lobby. Again, we've got a space that is, in this case, I think it's in that kind of 10 to 12 foot range. Here we were showing no doors and a sliding, like a sliding barn door that could close that off, thinking that most of the time this room is going to be open and available for people to use, for study, for quiet reading, for group activities, et cetera. And so there's an easy connection between the lobby and the meeting room, and this is a shallower depth between the two. So it's a little bit less of an impediment. In option 3, we have probably the best relationship between lobby and meeting room, although in this one, the orientation of the meeting room is different, with the presentation wall being on the long side, because of, in this scheme, an interest in trying to make this is glass with doors. And again, that could be handled a number of ways, but there's obviously a strong visual connection and potentially a strong physical connection, although it's kind of out the side of the room instead of the back of the room, in order to create some continuity from lobby to meeting room to covered outdoor program area. It doesn't make as much sense to have the presentation wall on this end. And so So you're entering the side of the room. So it's a little more awkward, I think, than the other two. But they all recognize that that's a goal, and we're trying to figure out ways to accommodate that the best we can.
Are there any more questions? Since someone here asked if we're going to take a straw poll, I think we will be taking a straw poll. We'll give you a few minutes to think about it. For those of you who are on the webinar, you can send your email straw poll to livebuild@shutesbury.org, and we will count you. So take a few minutes, think about it, stretch, stand up, say hello to your neighbors. We'll turn the lights on so you don't fall asleep. And we'll give you a few minutes and we'll take a straw poll. Excuse me? Matt, could you please put the slide up that has the 3 comparisons? Thank you.
I found Chris back there. I told him. Hello. We're gonna do nice concerts in that meeting room. Small, you know, yes, yeah. And outside too. Oh, well. In the meeting room. Yeah. Services are gonna be hard. Yeah, yeah. I mean, if we talk about floating floor, that was your question, right? Right. Yeah. I mean, if we can afford that, you know, but we'll talk about that. And that really is like, now we're really looking for like, how do you, how's it gonna fit on the site? And then where are the spaces that go together? And then they're talking about mass timber, so wood, you know, beams. It's supposed to be, right, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. So, so, you know, it's not a concert hall, you know, yeah, yeah. Okay. Yes. Yes. But we know how to go off onto the grass or park over at the highway department, you know, or park at the fire station and walk down, so I mean, we would have 20 people at yoga in town hall. And I don't know how many institutions.
So if you're on the, Brett, if you're on the webinar, please bring your votes to the email. I have a number of them already, but this is your last chance. I'll give you two more minutes. Thank you. Matt, you're standing in front of it. All right, folks. Our architects have a long drive back to Boston, so let's all sit down, make up your mind, and we're going to vote, and we're going to do a hand-raising vote, okay? Excuse me? Of course we can vote. You're part of the community, just because it's... So, everyone who is in favor of option 1, please raise your hand. Wow. Okay, wait a minute.
Wow.
Okay. I'm looking to make sure there are no votes for option 1, whether it be on the webinar or in person. Option 2, please. Somebody else count. I'm counting the votes here.
Are we raising our hands too?
As she's counting, I have a question. We are recognizing that as we move forward, there's going to be more information available on everything that could make us say, oh, in regard to straw poll or what we thought that there may be new.
Yeah, I mean, the design will continue to evolve. So
total,
there will be more information as we go. But I think what we are suggesting is that we are going to move forward with one version of a building, and then we're going to continue to refine that version until it's, doing all the things that we want it to do. If that, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
Okay, so in the room, there were 34 votes for option 2, and online, there were 12. Now, option 3. Option 3 got 9 votes in person and 1 vote online.
Well, no, we've got 1,
No.
2.
No. If you read through this one, it says 3. It says 2.
All right. Okay.
You have to read the whole thing.
All right. Well, there
Okay.
there are 2 online. 'Cause Mark Rush and then, and so on them.
Oh, I forgot, I missed him, sorry.
They came
There are
in
2
after.
online.
Yeah.
2 online and 9 in person. So it's looking like the majority
of the vote is for option 2. And we will take your advice and move forward. And I want to thank you all for coming out. I want to thank you all for being on the webinar. I want to thank you for all your good questions. And I want to thank Matt for all his good answers.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out. This is really helpful. Thanks.
This was fun. The webinar is ending now.